Good afternoon. Welcome to this very important panel on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the fourth industrial revolution. I think it's one of the most topical issues in the world, also one of the driving forces behind the competition between G2. But also we know that AI has a huge potential when it comes to doing things differently or increasing productivity. At the World Economic Forum, we have looked at productivity gains possible by AI in the coming decade. And if it's applied in the right way, it can lead to 30% increased productivity. And productivity is prosperity. There's no other way to increase prosperity than increasing productivity. And if countries or companies are able to increase the productivity along these lines, we could see gains annually of $5 to $7 trillion US. That's a lot. The global economy is like 108 trillion US dollars. So are we now at a crossroads where we're seeing something like electricity or the internet with AI, or is it hyped? And we can look at the opportunities with AI, but there's also big challenges. And today there's no traffic rules globally. European Commission presented traffic rules for Europe. Can we be out traffic rules when it comes to AI that has, as I said, huge potential, but also can lead to something that can get off control and get almost smarter than humans? So there's a lot of questions related to this. We have 47 minutes and 42 seconds, it says here, to discuss this with an amazing panel. And I also have a strong interest in closing this because I'm on a new panel in the plenary 5 minutes after this. But let's get started. We have a great panel. We have Dima Al-Ayaya, Secretary General, Digital Cooperation and Organization, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a real true leader in this area. We collaborated so much on this. We also have Jonathan Adashek, Senior Vice President of Marketing, Communications, and Chief Communication Officer, IBM, one of the really big movers on AI. Will be very interesting. Sheikh Mohammed Al-Thani, Deputy Group CEO of Uredo, one of the big digital companies in the region. And then we have Debjani Ghosh, President, National Association of Software and Services Companies, NASSCOM, India, the fastest growing of the large economies in the world. This year, more than 8%, and part of it is also related to digital. 1.4 billion Indians have a digital ID. Last but not least, Jared Cohen. Just have to look so I get the title right. Jared, President of Global Affairs and Co-Head of Applied Innovation, Goldman Sachs, formerly with Google and Jigsaw for a decade, and also someone that knows this field extremely well. Let me start with you, Jared. I mentioned China and the US as competitors in the field of artificial intelligence. Where does that stand? How much of a driving force is that in the competition between these two nations representing 45% of the global GDP? And if you can also, in 2.5 minutes, also say something about is AI of the size of electricity and the internet, or is it hyped? So
2 minutes, maybe I can get those extra 47 seconds that you alluded to before. Berge, thanks so much. It's great to be with this distinguished panel and wonderful to be here on behalf of Goldman Sachs at the Doha Forum. Look, I like to think of things before COVID and after COVID. And before COVID, if you look at the competition between the US and China, particularly when it came to technology, the way I would sum it up is the US basically had a 3-decade first mover advantage in technology, and it kind of, or more or less, ended in a tie. China, before COVID, was producing 5 times the number of software engineers at the same level of skill. They'd surpassed the US in e-commerce, in payments, voice recognition, facial recognition, quantum communications. They were neck and neck in terms of quantum computing. You kind of get the narrative. Then COVID happened, and the geopolitical center of gravity, frankly, shifted from this part of the world to a much broader seismic competition between the US and China, which only elevated the technology issues. And this was before the emergence of generative AI. So a little over a year ago, November 30th of last year, the entire world, I've never seen this happen with technology before. The entire world found out that there was something called generative AI at the exact same time, November 30th of last year. That level of simultaneity around technology has never happened in the history of technology, and anyone that thinks it does is being revisionist about it. What that means is it kind of kicked off this situation where every company in every country was simultaneously grappling with how to lean into this, what strategies to formulate, how to take advantage of it, what the vulnerabilities are. And what's interesting is until the emergence of generative AI, the US-China tech competition was trending in the wrong direction for the United States. And generative AI as a technology that is at a minimum close to the most significant invention since the internet, has flipped that balance. And there's a couple reasons why China has an uphill battle, at least in the short and medium term, when it comes to generative AI. The first is the US put a set of export controls on GPU chips in October of 2022. Ironically, not because of generative AI, for other reasons, but it means that China lacks the processing capability, at least in the short and medium term, to power these large language models. Second, because of kind of the nature of how information is dealt with in China, they don't want to train models at internet scale. Third, the Chinese system is just less comfortable with the black box nature of these large language models, where we don't know exactly why the models are able to do what they do. And then fourthly, just the sort of the regulatory environment in China puts a stricter set of requirements on precision and quote correctness for these large language models. And so it's changed the nature of the competition between the US and China around technology in a space that honestly is the catalyst for all other forms of competition. So whether you're talking about, again, AI, semiconductors, quantum computing, this is the big accelerant and the aspect of that competition that matters more than anything. And Berge, just to touch on your last question, and then I've exhausted my 2 minutes and 48 seconds, is this as big as electricity? It has the potential to be. This could be the greatest accelerant in our lifetime, right? It's impossible to talk about generative AI without talking about how it augments every single thing that we see. In the last chapter, we're sort of in these inter-AI years between the last chapter of AI, where it was happening largely in the background, and a future chapter of AI where it exists as part of our daily lives. And it's too early to know if it will meet its potential or if it will just end up being a great vulnerability for jobs and the geopolitical system, but it certainly has the potential.
Thank you. It was really worth the extra time. Thank you. Very interesting. Let us now go to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and also to you, Dima Al-Yahya. You are one of the leaders in the kingdom on the digital economy. You just heard Jared saying that it potentially could be as big as electricity. Is the kingdom prepared for this? Is the kingdom on its forefoot on this? Or is it more in the other category? And what are you doing to make sure that this will be a competitive advantage for your country?
Well, great question, Burge. Thank you so much, and it's great being here, great being with great friends again. Looking at the challenge, when we look at or the abundance of opportunities of utilizing of AI, we come to a very big challenge, which is capacity. and the infrastructure, if we know that 2.7 billion people, which is 1/3 of the world, is unconnected and they're offline, when we see that not only the unavailability of connectivity, but also the affordability of devices and services, where 8.2% of the income of a person in a low-income country is spent on mobility and mobile devices. If we see that more than 700 million individuals, which is 2/3 of that number is women, that they have digital literacy skills, and they don't have. So we have a bigger challenge when it comes to how are we going to use AI, which is the capacity. Now, in looking at the landscape of the Digital Cooperation Organization, where we represent 15 countries, where Saudi is a member of the organization, from that 15 countries with the capacity of 800 million in population, only 2 countries have supercomputers. And not only that, but the availability of GPUs as well. Also when it comes to skills and capability building. So here is where we're working on an initiative which is to provide decentralized capacities between our member countries, which are headquartered within the likes of Saudi Arabia, to create that infrastructure for innovators and for policymakers to try and build local content within the countries, within the member countries, and to help and support not only the nation itself, but all the nations around them.
Well, thank you very much. I go to Sheikh Mohammed Al Thani. Ooredoo is one of the big players here in the digital space. We're in also, you're based here in the host country, in Doha. And where do you see the potential for the digital economy and including AI? Today, digital economy is 15% of the global economy. But what is very interesting is that it grows 2.5 times faster than the traditional economy. So it's a great potential in this area too.
Indeed. First of all, I would like to thank you for being here and being among the distinguished guests. As you rightly said about the digital economy and how we, being the heart of, let's say, providing the connectivity and facilitating for that economy. We at Ooredoo, as you rightly said, we are having, we're having a footprint across, the MENA region and South or Far East Asia, and our technology advancement really varies. When we talk about the digital economy, we see as the frontier for accelerating that digital economy, and a high percentage of economics honestly rely on the operators. And what we call today, we don't see ourselves as a telco, traditional telcos. We look at ourselves, being smart telcos and digital service provider, as you already said. I would like to say a few things here. It's about what is, the theme of today's discussion is about the opportunities and also the threats or the risk. I see it from, I'm quite optimistic about the AI technology, and being a technology provider, we see it's for more productivity and more efficiency. I would like to give you an example from telecom sector, and stating that example from the successful World Cup that we delivered from country level and also as a connectivity provider from Ooredoo. What we did from each game, we analyze and we do these machine learning by the AI and understand the traffic magnitude and how we can enhance and improve each quality. And when we go for, let's say, the highest dense game, we need to make sure that the experience, the throughput are really being implemented to be as successful and to be a seamless journey for the customer. Also, we look at from a telco provider, or let's say from telecom sector, enhancing the customer journey and being, offering a personalized offer. Today, with the AI, we can understand each customer, let's say, appetite and from his behavior. we can attack him, or let's say provide him with the attractive offer. Let's say if someone really a price sensitive customer, how we can, you know, nudge him by a personalized offer to upgrade his, let's say, packages by more value into money. So these are examples from a telecom sector. We really feel that it's really productive for us and can take, you know, the sector ahead and advancing also the, you know, the economy of the country.
No, thank you very much. I'm now gonna go to Debjani Ghosh, not only the president of National Association of Software and Services, formerly also the first woman to lead Intel India. So you're someone that knows this area very well. As I mentioned initially, India is having substantial economic growth. Not only is India growing 8% this year, but our economists do believe that is a snowball effect now for India. It's when it first starts to roll, it gets bigger and bigger and goes faster and faster. How much do you think the digital economy is part of this success, and how will India continue to make sure that it is competitive when it comes to these new technologies? We mentioned US and China and the competition, and Jared also underlined that he thinks no, US is leading in the race of AI, and also mentioned the reasons why. Where is India in this race?
Thank you. Thank you so much for, first of all, organizing this extremely timely discussion, and it's such a privilege to be here. I was recently in US and then part of Europe, meeting with companies as well as government, and there were discussions on, as you think about reimagining your supply chain strategies, your expansion strategies, innovation strategies, which are the countries that you are considering and thinking about? And I wrote on this on the flight back to India because it was amazing how in every single dialogue, India was a must-have discussion. In fact, I wrote on this saying, is this the era where we are becoming inevitable India from what we were known as incredible India? Is this a shift from incredible India to inevitable India? And I was thinking about it, like what is driving this shift? Yes, we are growing fast. We are a young country. We have tremendous talent. We have tremendous technology prowess. But if you think about it, I think there are three broad shifts that we see where India is placed very strategically. The first, as you said, is the digital transformation, and especially what's now happening with AI. Technology today is getting weaved into pretty much, if I may call it that, the core workflows of India. How we do business, how government governs, how education happens, how healthcare happens. And it's getting weaved into it. The approach we've taken is exactly the opposite of what we've seen traditionally in the Western world. We are starting with a grounds-up approach. We are starting with an approach of, does this impact the last woman or the last man, wherever she or he may be, right? Can she or he benefit from this? And then how do we scale up? So that inclusive approach is definitely getting recognized, appreciated. Second, the transformation of supply chains. As you're thinking about, I think everybody learned a very important lesson that you cannot depend on one country. So you're looking at regional blocks coming out. You're looking at regional hubs, ecosystems. I think the role India is playing in leading the voice of Global South, BRICS, is becoming very important from reimagining of supply chains in that region. And last but not the least is the green transformation, where again, we are the only country of scale where 1/3 of our energy is going to be renewable energy. So I think the world is looking at India's play in these critical transitions that's happening. And that, coupled with the advantages we have in talent, digital growth, digital economy, I think is definitely driving the shift from incredible India to inevitable India.
Thank you very much. A good headline for those that are tweeting. Coming to you, Jonathan, IBM is big in this area. You heard also what was mentioned that AI might be as big as electricity. Secondly, was discussion about the G2, the technology competition. Jared is of the view that US is now ahead of China in this field, if you can share an assessment of that. And lastly, the productivity gains. Is this like a productivity revolution? Will it happen everywhere? Or will there be also a big change of who are the most prosperous companies and countries moving forward, especially if they're late in implementing these new technologies? 3 easy questions.
I'll try and remember all 3 of them. But
first, electricity,
yep.
US, China,
yep.
and then productivity.
So
I'm glad I remembered.
So first, thank you for having me and for putting on this amazing forum. If we start with electricity, the way we look at this is AI is having its Netscape moment. So I'm not going to compare it to electricity. I'm going to compare it to the internet. And let's look at the impact that the internet has brought to countries around the world and economies around the world. And we believe that we're in the same place that we were as the internet moment was getting started. And the massive potential for AI to shift the position of companies and countries is there, and we think it is going to get there. But the key to doing that is going to be regulation. And how that gets implemented around the world and getting some standards there that allow a true open source approach and open innovation that is going to get the best ideas out there is going to be incredibly important for this, and that cannot be understated. If I look across the countries, I don't necessarily disagree with Jared and what he was saying there. I think that it's the start of the race, right? It is the beginning of the game. We're in the very early stages, so anything can really happen in this spot. And the last question was
the productivity.
Productivity changes and opportunities are going to be massive, because what's going to happen is it's not going to be the people who don't. People ask me regularly. I go around to, part of my job as chief communications officer is to go to newsrooms, and I regularly get asked, "Is AI going to replace my workforce, my job? What is it going to be?" AI is not going to do that. What it's going to do is the people who aren't using AI, those are the ones who are going to be replaced. It's going to augment. Our position on AI is going to augment people's productivity. And I'll give you a quick example of something we did inside of IBM. So we've got 270,000 employees around the world. We took one of our HR service centers, which had 800 people in it. We automated the repetitive tasks, the simple claiming of forms and that kind of thing. We took that 800 down to about 60 people. We're saving almost 50,000 hours of productivity a year in that one piece of the business. And at the same time, we're doubling the speed of promotions. We're making it easier for people to get the information they need. That's a very simple application with just basic level. There's a lot more that can happen in companies of all sizes. I think the productivity is going to be there for everybody to capture.
Also for investments banks, you're going to take out a lot of productivity gains, Jared?
So it's interesting. There's kind of an upstream and a downstream to this, right? The upstream is what gets all the attention, right? It's the very glamorous use cases like protein folding and all these things that kind of shift our imagination. That stuff's going to take a while to really gain traction in a commercial way. There's the downstream, which is less glamorous to talk about. It's where all the money is going to be made in the short and medium term, and it's what's going to transform businesses in the short term, right? And it's questions of operational efficiency, productivity. And so if you look at a bank like Goldman Sachs, what are some of the ways that you could, and right now we've been kind of taking a view that we want to try a lot of different experiments, see what works, what doesn't work, have the ability to fast follow. The space is moving so quickly, and so many of the inflection points that are going to define where this goes are still going to play out over the next couple of years that you actually don't want to go too far in one direction, or you could end up kind of picking the wrong theory of change. The way I like to think about this, and the way we think about it at Goldman, is imagine if you have kind of an infinite number of interns and analysts and junior people who can get you that fantastic first draft. And that first draft is not just written, that first draft also includes coding. Right? So the productivity gains you get by getting 90% of the way there on coding, doing bug bashing, doing kind of testing, doing kind of beta relevant activity, huge gains there. You think about earnings calls, right? You have large numbers of people who are kind of summarizing and analyzing earnings calls, right? You can the ability to summarize and the ability to analyze, you can do 90% of that as a first draft. But exactly as my fellow panelists have mentioned, it doesn't take out the need for high-skilled analytical capabilities to take it that last 10%. And I don't think that last 10% is going to get disintermediated. I think that last 10% is just going to get up-leveled. What gets disintermediated is people who are highly educated, highly skilled, and not putting the effort in, right? So you imagine somebody comes to you for a pitch. The expectation is not going to be, give me your pitch. The expectation is going to be, tell me something that the generative AI models can't tell me. And everybody's going to have to up their game.
If I can just jump in, sorry. I mean, to Jared's point, 20% of, it's like an iceberg, AI is today. 20% is this bright, shiny object that everybody sees above the water. It's the 80% that's below the water that's really going to make an immediate impact right away.
Since we have now mainly focused on the positive aspects of AI when it comes to productivity gains and also prosperity, I think we need to also speak about the potential downsides and the threat. And we'll also come back to Dima's point about access and who can be part of this economy, because it is 3.7 billion people that are not even adequately connected digitally today. And we know that digital economy so far has been a winner-takes-it-all economy. And what will happen with also the inequalities in the world based on this. But first, just shortly to you, Jared, can AI easily get out of control? Can it outsmart people? Can it become so powerful that it is like a pandemic, so it can spread so fast that and take on sizes that we cannot manage as human beings, and when the genie is out of the bottle, it's impossible to get it inside. How big a threat is this? How do you think we will manage moving forward? Do you see any signs for any kind of management around this? Does it keep you up at night?
So we have already crossed the threshold where this is not a fleeting trend, right? I agree with Jonathan that it's we're in the early stages of this, so we don't know what this looks like as a sort of once in a generation technological development, but this is not a fleeting trend. So there's an inevitability to it. That's the first point. The second point is, if you look at the last chapter of technology, where there were a handful of players and have been a handful of players in the technological ecosystem that in theory could be regulated, the regulation couldn't keep a pace with what was happening. And so I like to say that what we've experienced is a chapter of technology previously that's seemingly impossible to regulate, but can be regulated. I look at the sort of chapter we're in the early stages of embarking on with generative AI And it can go in one of two directions: a scale-up direction where it turns out that the only way to drive this is very kind of closed, proprietary, large language models with big kind of walls that are barriers of entry, in which case it looks a little similar to the last chapter where there's a handful of players and those players exist within jurisdictions. Or it can go in a different direction, which is kind of a more scaled down, where it's these open source large language models that dominate. They are very, very difficult to control, and the play for everybody else is to basically fine-tune context-specific data on top of those open source models. If we go in that latter direction, it's impossible for me to imagine how any of this can be regulated in any meaningful, enforceable, multilateral way. And the world is having a hard enough time, as you know well, Berge, being multilateral on issues of shared concern to the earth. Where everybody has a vested interest, the likelihood that the most important technology at the center of the most significant rivalry in more than half a century, the likelihood that sort of like-mindedness prevails and there's some kind of magical global governance structure that exists on top of it, very difficult for me to imagine. Which means we have to start imagining and thinking about and getting ahead of some of the geopolitical spillover that can happen, right? This isn't just about social and political dis and misinformation. The threats to market integrity, the sort of the CNBC crowd, which is kind of usually protected from these types of things, is something I worry very much about. Imagine a world where a future terrorist organization doesn't need human beings to go out and recruit, but can just train large language models to recruit all over the world. We already know these large language models have the ability to be more persuasive than human beings. And again, the list goes on.
Johnny, do you agree on this? Because we know from cyber attacks today, I don't think countries really share how much challenges there are and how much money they lose on cyber attacks already. And it's hard, of course, to also really establish who's behind, but we know there are trillions of US dollars lost every year. And will we see something like this in AI? And is there any way that we in this polarized world can at least agree on some rules of the game like we did after the Second World War when it comes to proliferation of nuclear weapons?
I absolutely agree with everything that Jared said. I mean, this is a sort of engineering issue, right, where you're throwing so much data and compute at it, and you're continuously getting surprised at what it can do and how fast the capabilities are growing. But somewhere in this narrative, two things are happening. One, we seem to be looking away from human accountability. Somewhere in the narrative, we are making it all about technology. Will AI do this? Will AI do that? It's still the humans behind the AI that are making those decisions. I think this is a crucial time where the choices we make, the decisions that we make as humans, is going to shape what AI will do in the future. And, while regulation talks about alignment as the biggest challenge in AI, aligning AI to human values, I believe, Borge, that the biggest challenge ahead of us is aligning humans to human values. I still don't think we've been able to do that. I still think there's tremendous amount of work left to be done in aligning all humans with human values. And if we could focus on that via education, etc., I honestly believe we will not have to worry about a lot of these problems, right? But that, I think, is an impossible dream. But that said, the way regulation is shaping out today, I mean, the EU Act came out day before, well, not Act, but the agreement was announced day before. If you followed social media, all of yesterday, there were companies talking about, okay, if EU is going to favor open source models, companies working on open source models in US should move to EU, right? I do worry that what we are going to see, and this is going to happen with deep fakes, this is going to happen with pretty much all applications, that your regulation is going to become another country's competitive advantage. And this is going to be a very ugly war that will play out. And I think it's going to be extremely important. I don't believe we can ever reach a stage where everyone will sit down and agree on one way to regulate AI, and they shouldn't, because regulation is deeply rooted into culture too. Cultural context plays a very important role. But I do believe and I do hope that we will be able to get together to agree on at least design principles for regulation, which will give it some level of uniformity.
Thank you.
Can I
Yeah,
jump on that?
I was coming
Okay, yes.
to you, was planning Dima, and please comment on that. I also should say that you are the founding Secretary General of the Digital Cooperation Organization, and I think what you're aiming for is also to make this more inclusive.
Exactly.
And that's, maybe you could also comment on that. Because if 3 billion is not part of this economy, it's not gonna, the north-south divide is not gonna get any less.
Exactly, and we're going to see the digital divide increase more and more if we don't create that capacity and that infrastructure that enables the low-income economies to take advantage of such kind of technologies. But again, that abundance of opportunities comes with it a lot of challenges, and building on these challenges as well is when we look at the availability of data itself. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was actually one of WEF's podcasts, and I was shocked to know that the past 6 months, the collection of data is more than data from the beginning of humanity. That's by itself is huge. Numbers like 175 zettabytes, which is a new kind of measurement right now, is appearing.
It sounds a lot.
Exactly, it is. And so that collection of that data and enabling these algorithms to start processing that data, that is, and giving you these predictions, giving you these data-driven decisions is very alerting, especially when we look at challenges like privacy, safety as well. That is all unlabeled data that is not processed. So we're putting our trust in an algorithm to process such kind of data. Another thing is AI biases as well. Now, the more these AIs become mature, the more biases will appear. Now, especially when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to religion, when it comes to nationalities as well, there was a study that when applications for one university, the algorithm started to give percentages to nationalities. And that grew as an algorithm in terms of acceptance rate. Now, another factor, which is the third factor, I see it a very dangerous one, especially economically as well, in the financial sector. Now, these innovations are growing faster than the regulators. Even if we put in the regulations for AI, innovations are faster. Now, how can we incorporate these innovators in the co-creation and co-design of these regulations and policy, rather than waiting for the innovation to appear and then figuring out the way to regulate these innovations? And this is something we're working on heavily in terms of the multilateralism, going back to that factor, is that a strength in one country can be a solution for another. And building on best practices in countries together can accelerate and grow that understanding when it comes to the challenges of a technology and the availability of the technology itself. And this is where creating strides in terms of innovating and creating unified and harmonized policies and regulations, as well as guidelines, is very important.
Thank you. Coming to you, Sheikh Mohammed, your company is in a very fast-growing industry. That's for sure.
So I want to comment on what you just said. I love what you're saying about the human values. I think if we think about 3-4 decades ago, before the internet, everyone talking about the internet and how we can use it and how we can utilize it in the best way. Today we're talking about the AI. Every technology it's a double-edged sword. So how we need to balance that. I think we talked about the regulations, and you just mentioned about, it might be theoretically working, however, practically it's going to be very difficult to implement this. However, I would put it in a different way, is where we think about a right framework, right governance. You just mentioned about design. Maybe these are the type of words that we need to make sure how we can govern these. You touched base about the data privacy, data governance. That's very important. Also, these technologies. We are a human. We need to put that right principle before it goes out of our control. Otherwise, it's going to be bias. You just mentioned about the bias, and I totally agree with you. The transparency. So it could be going to that extreme. So I feel, we need to make sure that we put the right framework, we put the right governance, and we make sure that there is no misuse of these data. There is no, let's say, a fake of these data which can be misused and might drive your decision making and take you south and take you, in a wrong direction. So I totally agree with you. It's all about we put values, we put principles, and how we can really govern that at the beginning before it goes out of the control of the humans.
Thank you, Shukran. I have a few questions to you, Jonathan, but I'll do one by one this time. No. I'm first starting with the EU regulations that came out 2 days ago. I guess this is incredibly important for IBM too. You're a big operator also in Europe. How do you assess these regulations for AI that the EU came out with? Is that something that could be a basis for something global?
Yeah, we feel very positive about the preliminary framework that's come out. I think it's important to note that it is preliminary, right? There's still the negotiation, the final work on the details, and those details are going to matter because in something like this, it's really about the details. But it's the European framework that's been introduced is really going to advance that open approach, and we do believe that an open source approach is the best way to take this. But it's also pushing some accountability to the people who are putting out the AI, and that is going to be important. You can't just put AI out there, models out there, and let them run wild.
Have you tried to use any of these new tools and ask them to draft state-of-the-art regulations on this?
No.
Someone could try maybe what, for example, ChatGPT would give you if you ask, create global, responsible rules for AI?
I haven't, but what we've done as a company is we've developed our view of it. It needs to be transparent. People need to understand where the data is coming from. When we introduced our model, we put the basis there. It needs to make sure that people understand when they are interacting with AI. It needs to enable open source and create that innovation. And finally, it needs to be constructed in a way that prevents the misuse of it.
It was mentioned in the discussion here also that these algorithms can have bias. Yep. We know today that social media is constructed, so if you are a Democrat or a Republican, you get more and more feed in the direction your preferences are. Do you think those future AI tools will also be like, we'll have like a Fox News version and then you have a CNN version? Because I'm pretty sure that the ChatGPT, at least what I have seen, it's on the liberal side, I would say.
I think there's the ability for that, but I think it's about what are you creating the model for, right? And one of the things that we've introduced is WatsonX.governance, which is all about governing models, and it works not just with our own models, but with any open source model or any model that's out there, and it helps govern it and watch it for bias, for drift, for changes in the model. So you need the models to be authentic to what you're actually putting them out there for, and you can't just put a model into the wild and let it go, and most people aren't thinking about that and aren't watching that closely, and that is a really important point for people to focus on.
So since you were the last one to speak at the beginning, you get the last questions here. Last question to you is, We also have seen that in the digital economy, especially on the platforms, it has been the winner takes it all. Jared indirectly alluded to it too. So we know that his former employer, for example, Google, has so and so much of the market, and the others that are quite dominating too. Is AI something that will just underpin this, or we will see like global superpowers in this private superpowers, global private superpowers? Or is there something with AI that is more decentralizing? So we will see things happening in garages too.
I think there's a couple things that are important here. One is the open source, which I've talked about. That open source is going to be really important. And anybody who wants to put walls around a specific small set of companies that want to do this and say they're the only 3 or 4 companies that can do it, all they're going to do is drive the innovation offshore from their country, right? And it's going to happen someplace else. So I think that is there. But I think the other key piece here to make sure people have access is going to be skilling. Because as AI gets introduced to companies, people have to know how to use that AI, but they also need to know how to work in that new model with the AI in their system. So skilling is hugely important as well.
Last question, 1 minute answer, Jared. How concerned are you that the winner takes it all in this new AI piece? You touched on it a bit between the US and China. One question. And the other one, the inequalities that we are faced within the world today. How can we make sure that they are not growing based on these new technologies?
Look, I'll say, in the interest of time, I'll say 2 quick things about this. One, I don't think it's going to be a winner-take-all system. That's just, I think the evolution of technology is such that there's enough players in the ecosystem that that's not how it works, but there's also enough disparity in values, geopolitically speaking, that nobody wants there to be a winner-take-all. I like to say that technology is the language of efficiency. 196 countries around the world want to be more efficient as they define efficiency. There'll be a small number of countries that only want to use US technology. There'll be a small number of countries that only want to use Chinese-made technology. The vast majority of countries will have an efficiency model that is basically a mixture of Chinese technology and US-made technology that forms kind of a machinery of efficiency in their society. Then the second thing that I'll say about this on the winner-take-all system, I'll finish where I started, which is I talked about the unique simultaneity of this technology. What I didn't say is it's simultaneity without parity, right? So you'll have your incumbent countries that have the full stack, right? They have the energy, they have the compute power, they have the data, they have the models, and they have the applications. But then underneath that, you're going to get these AI swing states, which are countries that actually benefit from having some of those in a disproportionate way. They'll be able to influence what happens and the forward for AI in a way that they couldn't before. And then you have sort of the global south equivalent for AI, which is everybody that has to rely on someone else. And then you'll have your kind of rogue actors and disruptors. And right now we're in this kind of period, post-simultaneity where everybody has maximum flexibility to impact the direction that all of this goes. At some point, everyone's views harden, everybody's strategies are formulated, everybody starts implementing them, and we end up almost in this kind of generative world order where we lose that flexibility, and the sort of normative cards end up kind of landing where they are, and that's the future that we're all going to live with.
Thank you very much. I found this fascinating discussion, really a great panel. I think for us that were able to listen and get more enlightened, it was really worth spending a little bit less than an hour with you guys. I think they deserve a big applause.